Joseph, despised and rejected. Boker Tov, good morning. Welcome to another Aliyah. We are in Parashah Vayeishev, and this is the third Aliyah of the week. And we are talking now about the story of Joseph, diving deeper into this story. Today, we're going to be focused on the hatred that Joseph received from his brothers, and of course, the dreams that he had. We'll be talking about those and some insights related to that. As I said yesterday, the story of Joseph is so critically important because it is such a crystal clear picture of the depiction of the Messiah and how his brothers are not going to exactly like him. You're not going to be the boss of me. You're not going to be the king of me. We're going to be talking about more about that today, looking at some other insights related to that. And as I said yesterday, the fact that the Messiah is rejected is actually one of the proofs that, that he is in fact the Messiah. It's sometimes the proofs that we have actually work in the opposite. I'm going to give you an example here in just a moment. So, hey, good morning. Thank you so much for being here. Please be sure and like this video and share it with all of your friends. Pushing or clicking, pushing, that's funny. Clicking the like button is an amazing way, a simple way, but a very important way in which you can help this video reach people and therefore help the truth reach people. And so thank you for doing that. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel. We're just shy of 11,000 subscribers. I think that there's like 3 subscribers left and then we're at 11,000. Anyway, so we're almost there. It's just just a couple of clicks away from hitting 11,000, and that's a great milestone for us to achieve, and then we'll be on to 12,000. So thank you so much for that. Be sure and click the video and subscribe and so forth. I mentioned that sometimes our objections work and our proofs rather work in the reverse. So some people say, well, he can't be the Messiah since the Jews rejected him. But in actual fact, as we said yesterday, not all of us Jews have rejected him. So clearly I'm Jewish. I haven't rejected him. So it's not really true to say all Jews have rejected him. That's not true. But it is true that as a whole, Judaism has rejected Messiah. And there's somebody asked on the chats. I do go back and review the chats most every day after the fact in case I missed something. But some people, they ask various questions. And so somebody asked the question of if the Messiah is rejected today because he allegedly doesn't follow the Torah, and it's much deeper than that, by the way. It's not just that he doesn't follow the Torah, but it's really because of the false Paulinian doctrine. And man, listen, I say this, it seems like I say this every time I mention Paul. I totally understand the brainwashing, the emotion, but man, Paul is such an idol in people's lives. It's just unbelievable. But anyway, I digress. So because of Paulinian theology doesn't just teach abandoning Torah, which he absolutely taught that 100%. Okay. But it also taught that the covenants have been taken away from the Jewish people and given to the nations, which interestingly is part of our sources today with respect to the brothers' concerns about Joseph. Oddly enough, we call this supersessionism or replacement theology. That means, and replacement theology comes from Paulinian Christianity. Hello, that's where it derives from, guys. Okay, and it's no, it's not a misunderstanding of Paul. And no, by the way, Peter did not affirm Paul in 2 Peter because Peter didn't write 2 Peter. It was a known forgery. Hey, did y'all know that, by the way? I know some of you Jedi Knights that are long-term students of the Lapid Judaism yeshiva / School of Jedi Skills know this already, but for those of you who are maybe a little bit newer to the program, did you know that Peter did not write Second Peter? That it is a known forgery, and no, that's not a conspiracy theory. No, I'm not a nutcase. Even the earliest church fathers said so. And I bring this up because I can't tell you how many times in the last 2 weeks I've had people reach out to me and say, "How can you say Paul was a liar and a false or heretic rather, and a false apostle when Peter said blah blah blah?" My reply to them is, Peter didn't say that. To which I normally get total silence, because that's kind of a buzzkill. If Peter didn't say that, then So anyway, but going back to this issue. One of the things that Paul did absolutely 100% positively is he created this idea of supersessionism or replacement theology. And so that's one of the reasons. But the question was asked, by the way, why is it then that Yeshua was rejected in his time? Because in his day, Yeshua did not teach against the Torah, nor against the oral Torah, because Yeshua was a Pharisee 100,000%. That is an absolute fact, easily proven if you know what you're looking for, which it's not exactly hard to find. There's only, a couple of score of examples of this, not to mention the fact that John the Baptist said to the Pharisees, "There is one among you that you do not know," meaning there is a Pharisee among you who is in fact the Messiah. So that's what he said in the John chapter 1. So anyway, so Yeshua wasn't teaching against the Torah. He wasn't teaching against the oral Torah either. How do we know this to be sure, by the way? Because none of it was brought up at his trial. Nobody at his trial said anything factual about him actually breaking the written law or the oral law. So the question now becomes, why did they reject him then if it wasn't because of Paulinianism, in other words? The answer in his day was jealousy. He got the coat. Which now brings me to the question of the coat, because somebody had a question yesterday, which was, if the coat was the coat that God made Adam, then why is it in the scripture that it says that Jacob made a coat for Joseph? Now, to be sure, there are commentaries that suggest that, in fact, Jacob did make a coat for Joseph. Some speculate, including Rashi, which, by the way, Rashi is very much a commentator who focused on almost exclusively on the Peshat level of the text, meaning the literal meaning of the text. Rashi typically did not dive into the more spiritual, more sod level, more drash or remez level of the text. But having said, putting that aside, there are plenty of commentaries that suggest that he actually made the coat. Some say he made it out of fine wool. I was just reading an insight that said that it was made out of a super fine silk that weighed just a few ounces. It was so fine. There's an insight that actually says that he made the coat out of the wedding gown that Rachel had worn. There's some of those ideas, but quite frankly, it doesn't make a lot of sense, because that, first of all, suddenly Jacob's a tailor? Maybe so. Maybe one of his skill sets is he can make clothes. I don't know about that. I mean, making clothes is not something that every man knows how to do necessarily. Usually that's a craft. Doesn't mean he can't do it, but where did we read that he made clothes before? Because, what do you just wake up one day and go, I think I'm going to make my son a coat, a nice one too, a fine one, not just any coat. We're talking like Louis Vuitton makes handbags. Who makes nice clothes? Who cares? Anyway, Tommy Hilfiger. I make a Tommy Hilfiger coat for my son. I mean, it's a nice coat, right? It wasn't just some. If I woke up yesterday or tomorrow, woke up yesterday. If I wake up tomorrow and I decide I'm going to make a coat for somebody, it's probably going to be fairly shabby, okay? Because I've never made a coat before. But putting that aside, maybe he did in fact make it. But it doesn't make a lot of sense, because this coat, as we're going to find out, invokes um, a significant hatred from the brothers. And if his father had just made him a coat, uh, you know, would that in and of itself invoke this level of hatred? Because the commentators mention several times that the brothers absolutely hated him because of the coat. Well, not entirely because of the coat, but that was a big part of it. So if dad woke up one day and just decided he was going to make a nice coat for Joseph, would the brothers be all that super upset? Maybe. But I'm going to suggest to you that I think the coat had a lot more significance than that. I think that the coat was more of a statement. Now, then we've got to go back and we've got to think about the fact that, well, first of all, let's deal with the word made. Can the word made mean made as in he literally made it? Yes. It can also mean brought forth or produced as, like not necessarily made, but you kind of like produce it, bring it forth, kind of like when the proverb says, talking about the Torah, that I was the first of his works, right? That he made. Well, we know the Torah is eternal. We know the Torah is Hashem. So did God make the Torah? Is the Torah a aspect of creation? The answer, of course, is no. And that sense in Proverbs 28, the idea is that he brought the Torah forth. That, in other words, he made it manifest, as it were, in the universe. Okay. So it just so happens this same word for made is the same word that is used when it talks about Abraham and the souls that Abraham and Sarah made before they had children. So it's talking here, of course, about the converts. Now, did Abraham did Abraham and Sarah actually literally make the converts? Of course not. But what did he do? He brought them forth, meaning he made them in the sense that he brought them to their true purpose. Mankind's true purpose is to become a Jew. Did you know that? Mankind's true purpose is to become Jewish. What? Well, mankind's true purpose is to become Torah observants, which is what it means to be a Jew. So there you go. Now, going back to this concept here, we also have to ask ourselves another question. Everybody agrees that the coat that Rebekah gave Jacob that he wore in front of his father, Isaac, everybody agrees that that coat was, in fact, the coat of Adam, and that coat was a coat that Esau stole when he murdered Nimrod. And the reason that Rebekah had it was because it was of such import that Esau didn't want his pagan wives to get a hold of it, because he was afraid they might sell it on eBay or Marketplace or take it to Goodwill. And so he gave it to Rebekah, and Rebekah gave it to Jacob, and Jacob wore it. And that's the coat that smelled like Gan Eden. And we went through all of that. Okay. Now, what happened to that coat? If this coat wasn't that coat, well, what happened to that coat? I mean, that's a pretty important coat, right? So if Jacob made a nice, pretty, beautiful, Armani, or not Armani. Armani's a different. Armani makes socks. Armani makes suits. If he made like an Armani coat for Jacob, or excuse me, for Joseph, and the brothers saw that, they're like, oh man, he made him a nice coat. Why did he make me a nice coat? Okay, that's one thing. It's a possibility. But can you imagine if Jacob actually gave Joseph the coat of Adam? It also makes sense with their other concerns, which I'm about to share with you just a moment. But let's go back to this coat thing. So who tells us that the coat was the coat of Adam? Mayam Loez. Mayam Loez tells us that this coat was the coat that Esau had basically given Jacob as a result of him selling him his birthright. And as a result of that, and it just so happens, by the way, the very day that Esau sold him the birthright was the very day that he stole this coat from Nimrod. So the source, the art scroll picks up on this. The art scroll commentary to Breishis picks up on this, and it says, Mayam Loez mentions a tradition that the tunic was the garment that Jacob received from Esau when the latter sold him the birthright. This garment originally belonged to Adam. It would fit only, pardon me, it would fit only a firstborn son. Okay. So this coat, in other words, had miraculous, naturally, because made by God, miraculous qualities to it. And it says it would fit only a firstborn son. Now you begin to see the developing hatred, why Jacob was despised, why he was rejected. And yes, I use that language from Isaiah chapter 53. Why? Because the sages say that Isaiah 53 absolutely is about the Messiah. Yes, it is. That's what they say. And it's about particularly the suffering Messiah who is known as Mashiach ben Yosef, Messiah, son of Joseph. Okay. And by the way, I want to remind everybody that Yeshua's literal name, when he was circumcised and when he was given his name here on earth, his name literally was Yeshua ben Yosef, salvation, son of Joseph. Okay. And Joseph is called in the Midrash, I remind you yet again, Joseph, savior of the world. Okay. So this is why it's important that we get his name right. It's not just about semantics. Okay. JC is not Yeshua and Yeshua isn't JC. Okay. You need to know that, believe that, trust that. But it's bigger than that. What is, pardon me for having to say it, what does the name Jesus mean? What does it mean? Nothing. Literally nothing. Is it a translation? No. Is it a transliteration? No. How long has it been extant among men? For about 400 years. That's all. Okay. Literally, prior to the 1500s, the name JC literally did not exist. You need to understand that, know that, believe that, trust that. But why is it more important? Why, if you say JC, son of Joseph, what does that mean? Nothing. If you say Yeshua ben Yosef, what does it mean? It means salvation, son of Joseph. So listen, the Messiah who came here, who is literally the suffering Messiah, just happened to be named literally after his father, who is named Joseph. And by the way, his mother's name is Miriam, and that's important because in the Torah, in the oral Torah, in the sources, we learn that the water that followed us around the wilderness, which was in fact Messiah, was called the well of Miriam. So here we have two things, just coincidence, I'm sure, that we have Miriam, who gave birth to the wellspring, who happens to be the son of Joseph, and he is Mashiach ben Yosef. Okay. So going back to this, now we say that now they look at him and they're just really upset. Why? Because when he puts on the coat, it miraculously fits him. And now the jealousy is through the roof. Why should it fit him? It shouldn't fit him. It should fit Reuben. But Reuben lost his place because of his indiscretion with Bilhah. And as a result, it went to the next firstborn son, which is the firstborn son of the next wife. See, Reuben was the firstborn son of Leah. So now Joseph is the firstborn son of Rachel. So now it goes to him. But nobody liked him. Nobody wanted him. But yet it fit him, and they were mad at him. Now let's go back and look at another story where there was a miraculous fitting. Okay. What am I talking about? Who can tell me really quickly? I'm going to give you 10 seconds. Who can tell me what I'm about to say? Use your Jedi mind skills. Use the Force, Luke. Use the Force. What am I about to say? The miraculous fitting. Who's going to tell me? Who's going to tell me? Come on. Move it with your mind. Put on the blast helmet. Don't use your eyes. Who can... Is anybody getting these Star Wars references? Who can tell me? I'm almost done here. I'm going to get to 20 seconds and it's over. Who can tell me what I'm going to talk about in miraculous fitting? Okay, nobody's going to say. Maybe you're still typing. Maybe you'll tell me in a second. Okay, here it is. David, King David. Everybody hated King David too. Remember I talked about this? Everybody hated King David. Everybody thought he was a fake. Everybody thought he was a phony. Nobody thought he was a legitimate Jew. They thought that he was the son of a promiscuous woman and literally an adulterous woman. By the way, same accusations that some Jews unfortunately make against the Messiah. They claim that Miriam got pregnant out of wedlock, and the whole thing with the whole virgin birth thing was made up. Okay. But what happened? David shows up to the valley where everybody is facing the Philistines, and Goliath is in the valley, and he's challenging them to send a warrior. And David has a lot of faith. He realizes that this Gentile is uncircumcised, which means he's outside the covenant, because you can't be in the covenant if you're uncircumcised. That's just a biblical thing. Okay. You're right, Eliezer. They thought he was a mumzer. Yeah, that's right. That's right, Randy. It's Saul's armor. So he goes to King Saul, and he tells King Saul, I'll go fight him. And King Saul says, all right, here, put on my armor. Now, King Saul's a big man. He's a big, like physically big man. David is not a little child, but he's a young man. He's, youngish. I don't know. I don't recall how old David was, but I'm assuming but somewhere between the ages of 18 and 20 something. So Saul knows that his armor, his royal armor, is not going to fit this young man. But what happens? What does the source tell us? The source tells us that when he put on Saul's armor, it supernaturally fit him. And Saul started to get jealous. The sources tell us that David saw the jealousy in Saul's eyes. And so he quickly took off the armor and said, you know what? I'm not used to fighting in this. I'm not used to, when I fight, I use a sling and my bare hands. That's how I destroyed a lion and a bear one time. Ask me about that later. But I'm not really comfortable in the armor. So he took it off really quickly because he didn't want to make the king jealous. So we see a correlation here that Joseph put on the coat from Adam and it miraculously fit him. Why? Because he was the chosen one. And then with respect to David, he put on the armor that was not supposed to be fitting for him, but yet it supernaturally fit him, which was a supernatural sign that he was in fact the true king. So we have these two correlations. One happens to be Joseph, the other happens to be David, and we have two Messiahs, Messiah ben Joseph, Messiah ben David. So now that the brothers see this, now that they really hate him. Okay. So it says, since the birthright had been taken away from Reuben because of the incident with Bilhah, the garment was now given to Joseph. According to this tradition, the phrase he had made would have to be interpreted or understood to mean in the sense of provided for him, which is exactly what I was saying. Now it goes on to say, according to Malbin, okay, Jacob presented Joseph with this tunic because, unlike the other brothers who tended the sheep, Joseph was always in attendance of Jacob. It was only fitting that Joseph be garbed beautifully when performing the mitzvah of serving his father. Similarly, Esau, who was renowned for this great devotion, wore that special garment while waiting upon his father. Okay. So it's saying here that it just makes sense because that's the garment that Esau would want to wear when he waited on Isaac, which is probably why Rebekah gave Jacob that garment, because that's the garment that Esau would wear when he would go in and wait upon his father. The difference is that when Esau wore it, Isaac did not smell Gan Eden upon him. It was only when Jacob wore it. There was another reason, though, why the brothers were concerned about Joseph. And this takes us back to, again, Pauline Christianity. Interesting enough. Abarbanel suggests that all the brothers hated Joseph because they interpreted Jacob's preference for him to mean that Jacob planned to disinherit them just as Abraham disinherited Ishmael and the sons of Keturah in favor of Isaac, and Isaac disinherited Esau in favor of Jacob. They feared that Jacob was grooming Joseph at their expense to be the sole heir to the blessing in the land. And that's exactly what Christianity did with the Mashiach. And by the way, Mam Loez brings down this very same insight, same thing. They were afraid because of Joseph, they would no longer be considered Jacob's children and they would no longer be considered their father, which is exactly what Christianity did with what I was talking about earlier in this broadcast about supersessionism, replacement theology, that the Mashiach has taken away the inheritance of the brothers and given it to the Gentiles. And so now Goliath, uncircumcised Goliath, is inheritor of the covenant, and we Jews who actually keep the Torah are somehow out of the picture. That's exactly what Paul taught, 100%. So what he said. It just so happens, ironically, that this is exactly what the brothers were afraid of with respect to Joseph. But what we learn eventually when Joseph reveals himself to his brothers, Joseph puts away those fears and says, I'm not disinheriting you. To the contrary, I'm elevating you. I'm, gonna be your brother, etc. Which is exactly what the true Messiah came to do. The false Messiah has been presented as doing exactly what the brothers feared. So they couldn't speak peaceably to him. They hated him with a passion. And he started to have dreams of grandeur. And he has a dream where he beholds, he said in chapter 37, verse 7, behold, we were binding sheaves in the middle of the field when behold, my sheaf rose and remained standing. And then behold, your sheaves gathered around and bowed down to my sheaf. His brothers answered and said, would you then reign over us? Would you then dominate us? And they hated him even more because of his dreams and because of his talk. And of course, we see the correlations with Joseph and Yeshua, that Yeshua had the proverbial coat, if you will. He had the anointing. He was doing great signs and wonders. He wasn't the only sage who would do signs and wonders, by the way. There were many other Pharisaical sages of renown who performed great miracles. The difference is that the miracles that Yeshua performed, he did with a word. In other words, he did it as a source of authority, whereas the other Pharisees would work their miracles in the name of somebody else, and sometimes in the name of Solomon, as an example. So and not only that, but whereas, as an example, Honi the circle maker, who was a Pharisee, he was famous for praying for a drought to end and, calling forth for rain. And in fact, it did begin to rain eventually and so on. It was a great miracle. The difference is that Yeshua commanded the rain to cease. Now, it's not so much that in the reverse, but the point, in fact, is that, remember, there was a storm and Yeshua rebuked the storm and it all of a sudden just stopped. Now, Honi prayed for rain. It began to rain. That's great. But what I'm trying to communicate is that Yeshua commanded the rain. He didn't just pray that the rain would stop. He didn't say, Lord, please, if it be thy will, oh God, please make this rain stop and go away. Come back another day. No, he said, storm cease. And it did. And the reason why that's important, because we might look at that as a non-Jew may look at that and go, well, that's pretty cool. He told the rain to stop. And a Jew looks at it and goes, oh, snap. Why, oh, snap? Well, because the oral traditions tell us that the only one who has the keys to rain, meaning water rain, is Hashem himself. No man has the power to command rain to stop or start. But yet this person did. Therefore, the disciples bowed to him at that instant and said, what manner of man of this is this, that even the wind and the rain obey him? That's why they said that. Because it wasn't just like, oh man, what a cool miracle. Whoa, boy, did you see that? No, it was like, whoa, wait. There is a key here. Okay, now, so they said, look, you're not going to reign over us. We're going to bow to you. Whatever. It's never going to happen. Onkelos says, by the way, Onkelos was a convert. Did you know that? Onkelos, one of the most important people in Jewish history, who wrote the Torah, Torah for sure, in Aramaic, and he wrote the Torah in Aramaic from a paraphrased point of view. And what, by the way, just as an aside, what makes Onkelos so important with respect to reading is he wrote this in the first century, and therefore his paraphrased version, paraphrase maybe not be the best word, but basically what he's doing is he's interpreting the text as it was understood in the first century. So he's kind of writing the Torah more from of this is what it means point of view, as opposed to a literal interpretation. So the Onkelos is so important. The sages say you should read the Torah portion twice, and then you should read Onkelos once in the same week. Okay. And it just so happens that Onkelos was a convert. So I just shout out to converts and their importance. But this is so important that still today, after 2,000 years, we're still reading Onkelos' work. Okay. But anyway, Onkelos writes here and says, do you imagine that you will be king over us? Do you expect to impose yourself as an authority over us, since people bow down before both kings and others in positions of authority? They go on to say, not only will you never be king over us, you will never exercise any authority over us. And that's brought down, that particular statement is brought down to us by Ramban. So what are we learning here? We're learning here that the hatred of they despised and rejected Yosef so much that they said, you will never, ever be king over us. You will never have any authority over us. In fact, we're going to kill you. And by the way, we're going to take your coat, by the way. This is why in the book of Revelation, I believe it's written there, where it says that when Messiah returns, he'll be wearing a vesture that had been dipped in blood. Why? It's a reference back to this statement, back to this story. Now, as it turns out, as we all know, well, I shouldn't say we all know, maybe you don't know, but the end of the story is that we all the brothers, all the people who said this actually do bow down and accept as their authority Yosef as their king. And of course, at that time, Yosef does not do it in a ha-ha, told you so manner. It's very emotional. He's crying, they're crying. It's very deeply emotional. But the fact of the matter is, the only brother they rejected, and just listen to this, this is important. Joseph is the only of the 12. He's the only brother that all the brothers, to include the father, rejected, okay, as king. And yet, he's the only brother that they all ended up bowing to. Now, true, Judah became king, but that was under the rule of David a long time later. So the only one that all the brothers literally bowed to was Joseph, who was the one who was despised and rejected. Right now in Israel, if I talk to 1,000 rabbis of just traditional, not even traditional, reform even, and if I said, hey, do you think that you guys think that Yeshua would ever be your Messiah? They look at me and say, you're nuts. No way ever would we ever accept him to be our Messiah. Ever, 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 ever. My response would be like, good. That's what you said about Joseph. Because the reality is that any Messiah figure in history that has been accepted, even by some, has always been a false Messiah. That's why I said yesterday, it's a good thing that, as it turns out, that we end up rejecting Yosef, or Yeshua rather, because it's actually proof that he was in fact the Mashiach. Joseph has another dream, and of course this dream goes a little bit further and actually seemingly includes his dead mother bowing to him as well, which is kind of prophetic of the Messiah, who is going to bow down to them again, meaning that even the dead will bow to me, meaning that all souls who have ever lived will bow to me. Now, clearly that's not going to happen to Joseph, but it will happen to Mashiach. So it says here in another quote, and I'm just going to quickly conclude here. There's, again, so much more to say. Now, from this point, I should mention that at the end of our Aliyah, they see the dreamer coming, they capture him, they throw him in a pit, they sell him to the Midianites, who sell him to Ishmaelites, and then eventually he gets sold to Potiphar. And by the way, in that whole process, the exchanging of coins, Mayam Loez brings down a series of exchanges, monetary exchanges, which just interestingly eventually ends up being 30 pieces of silver, which is kind of interesting, but it's true. So that if you calculate all the different between selling to the Midianites and selling to the Ishmaelites and then selling to Potiphar and so on and so forth, do all the math, it ends up coming out to 30 silver coins. But I bring that down in another Josh related to a comment from Mam Loez. But listen, the brothers, it says here, they looked at him and said, Joseph's brothers considered him to be a usurper. They looked upon Judah as the brother predestined by his qualities to found the future tribe, the future royal tribe. And they were ready even to then to accept Judah as their chief. Now, through his dreams and words, Joseph had shown his intention of taking over to be the head of the family. Thus, he went against the others and seriously threatened the peace and harmony of the family and the future of Abraham's descendants. So what does this teach us? And this will be our last insight today. It teaches us that the brothers wanted Messiah ben David, which is the one who's to come from Judah, okay, and rule and reign. What they didn't want is the suffering Messiah. And what do we hear today? We hear today amongst Jews, if you talk to them, why don't you accept Yeshua? Well, one of the reasons they'll give you is, well, there's not peace in the world. He didn't accomplish a mission of bringing in the tribes, and he's not sitting on the throne in Israel today, and there's not world peace. Now, I marvel at that because I wonder to myself, how is it that so many Jews have never heard of Messiah ben Yosef? I mean, it's everywhere in the commentary. It's not like it's a hidden little mystical nugget tucked away in the recesses of the Zohar. I mean, it's everywhere. So the question becomes, how can they not know this? And the answer is that it's not taught. It's not something that's really taught in Judaism today because, frankly, it's a little awkward. Our Messiah is supposed to come and die for our sins and be resurrected to new life and eventually become Messiah ben David. Hello. Hashtag, does that make you feel uncomfortable? Of course. Why? Because of Yeshua. So the answer is that the Jewish people, we all want the Messiah to come and to set up his earthly reign and basically bring world peace. And guess what? I do too. But that doesn't change the fact that before that can happen, even if you reject Yeshua today, which would be foolish, but then you still have to have a Messiah ben Yosef. That has to happen, ladies and gentlemen. So before the Mashiach can come and bring world peace, there has to be a Messiah who comes and dies and suffers for the sins of Israel. That's what all the sages taught. And that's what's missed today. And the brothers missed it too. That's all part of the spiritual picture. End of our Aliyah today. We have more to say, but we're just out of time. We'll be here tomorrow. Tomorrow we'll talk about the slight diversion in our story as Judah goes down and has his encounter with Tamar, which is very important because all of this is about the Messiah, and that story is too, but it's a little bit of a swerve away from the story of Yosef. We'll get that tomorrow. Until then, have a great, amazing day. Please like this video, share it with all your friends. Lots of great information here today. So shalom, blessings to you. Look forward to seeing you manana.